I think an important starting point is shame does not serve us in any way at all. It's quite a destructive emotion. It's like there is no benefit to it. So just take it off the table and, look at other ways. What sort of support do you need to keep on moving forward? There is space for all of us to be who we are. When we're authentic, we're actually operating at our best. I need to listen to them more and then communicate so you can be heard.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating better businesses. I'm a certified EOS implementer, an FBA-accredited family business advisor, and a business owner myself with several business interests. I work with established business owners and their leadership teams to help them live their ideal entrepreneurial life using EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. My guests come onto the show to kind of share the highs and lows of running a business, but also I often have experts on the show. And today is one of those experts. So today's guest has been likened to Winston Churchill. She has survived aggressive breast cancer, has developed 4 tenets to get through the cancer, and today she's going to share with you how you can use those 4 tenets to get through difficult times in business and personal. Caro McCourtie is the founder, coach, and speaker at EQE Coaching. Welcome to the show, Caro.
Thank you very much, Debra.
It's always lovely to have you here. So Caro and I have been friends for a long, long time. And in fact, Caro is a leadership coach, which means that where I do the EOS stuff, if any of my leaders need help, I rely on people like Caro to actually help them. So why don't you tell us a bit about your story? Because, that's some really impressive things in there.
I know. Winston Churchill is a bit of a biggie. So look, I started in brand marketing and, I've worked in New Zealand, UK and London and Australia. And then when I was in Australia, I transitioned into executive coaching. I got trained out of the US in an accredited corporate coaching school and set up a very successful coaching, training, and also speaking business. And with the coaching, always sort of targeted, business leaders, business owners. And that was going really, really well. And it was so I started that around about 2000. And around 2005, I wanted to get online. How do I do the online stuff? And it was there I ended up falling into literally digital marketing and some strategies around internet marketing that I had a lot of success with. So then I started doing that and also the coaching. And then with the digital side and my marketing background, it evolved into marketing consulting for SMEs. So I was running 2 businesses, both the coaching and also the marketing consulting business. And so just to make my plate even a little bit more full, I also set up a health and wellness business with a business partner. And unfortunately, that one didn't stand the test of time because they decided that their heart wasn't in it anymore. And because they were the expert on the health side of things, we closed that business. And then after my treatment with breast cancer and everything I went through there, I realized even though I've got a lot of skills in marketing, my passion, my true core is with coaching and working, one-on-one with people. I really want people to trust themselves and know that they've got this and that they do have the answers and that they can achieve the results that they want. And I love helping them do that.
Perfect. Okay, so that's kind of how so you said you got trained over in the US.
Yes.
Yeah, so how was that, doing the training from the US?
That was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I built a really good amazing network of fellow coaches. And I even spoke at their ICF conferences as well. So I think what I saw with my career, I've always had a global focus. So love New Zealand, love Australia, but I've also done a lot of work with clients in the US and also the UK. I've got Canada, and I have had one client, English speaking in Germany, but, so I've gone continental as well.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Okay, cool. So tell me, there's some really amazing things you've gone through in life. We're going to cover those off in more detail very shortly. What are the sort of 2 things that you're most proud of, professionally and personally? What would you say are the things you're most proud of?
Well, being likened to Winston Churchill was...
You must tell us more about that.
Yeah. So that was back in the days when I was brand marketing and I won the contract with Air New Zealand for business class with Paul Roger champagne. And Christian de Paul Roger, excuse my poor French, sent me this fax in those days likening me to Winston Churchill. I'm like, wow, I got those two famous quotes that we know for Winston Churchill. And yeah, it was their way. They had a close association with the Churchill family. So I suppose it was their way to communicate how delighted, because it just meant it tripled the volume of their sales. So they were very, very happy. And then
Just to pause for a second
Yes.
there. Is that where your love of champagne comes from? Because I
Yes.
know that you really enjoy bubbles.
No,
as do I.
no, actually before then. So when I did the OE round Europe with my two girlfriends in a combi van, we went to, Epinay and France. I never say that correctly.
Yeah.
And we ended up at the Paul Roger boutique champagne chateau, and I just fell in love with it. So it was from there. So then when I moved into what was then Allied Liquor and working in marketing there, I said, please, can I look after that brand? They had that brand. So yeah, that was sort of like the trajectory for that. So I developed the love of champagne, I think, when I was traveling around France.
Yes.
So yes, but it's always
business life
exactly.
as well.
Well, Paul Roger has always been one of my favorites. So, but they're all my favorites.
Anything that's French champagne is always good, right? Proper champagne. Okay, great. And so what about personally? Obviously you've gone through some pretty major things in your life.
Yeah, I think two things there is, yes, I've been through the breast cancer, but even before that, I returned to New Zealand from 18 years in Sydney to take on primary caregiving role for my late father. And then when he passed away, then my mother. And that for me was the most, I suppose, rewarding career position I've had. It was harrowing and it was also a huge privilege. And it really required my leadership skills and my coaching skills to go through that. I knew nothing about caregiving, both from the system perspective and also the, practical nursing perspective. So I'm very, very proud of that. I'm also pleased to be out the other side of breast cancer and to be termed cancer-free. And, of course, I've learned a lot about that. Like any world, it's a niche, it's a whole world. And I've learned about how many different types of breast cancer there are, different treatment regimes based on your type of breast cancer and the stages that it's at and everything like that. And, I'm happy with how I approached that. And I did develop 4 tenets to help me get through it, which I think were instrumental. And it wasn't like I sat down and went, I'm going to do this. They evolved and they were just like, my linchpins to get through it.
Because you can sort of, smile about it now and you've done an amazing job to come through it. But at the time, it was a bit of a shock from what I understand. And you had no idea what to expect. And the treatment went on for 18 months?
Yeah, it's still, and I'm still considered in recovery. So I'm cancer free, but I'm still in recovery. And that's another thing. It doesn't just stop with the active treatment. And again, I knew none of these terms. So I'm using them like they're every day, but I don't expect other people to know them. So with active treatment, so I started off, it was going to be one and done. And I never had a lump. But then when it was discovered, it was rather huge. What they took out was 8.5 centimeters. So you'd think, well, how could you miss that? But it really was not a lump. And because I've got dense breasts, which is a whole other subject, it didn't show up on a mammogram. So even in the day when it was discovered by the ultrasound, the mammogram and 3D mammogram were all clear. Dense breasts mean that you see a sea of white. Breast cancer is white. What I didn't know then is dense breasts, you have, double the chance of getting cancer. Breast cancer, yeah. So, but a lot of women, I'm actively involved with spreading the word around dense breasts because our public system at the moment isn't built to support that. In the past, when I went for my mammograms, it was almost like I made their job harder because of my dense breasts. So I used to feel bad that I was making their job harder because it's hard to get a clear picture, but I didn't understand everything that I know now. So after that first surgery, the lymph nodes with all the screening I had, which was the ultrasound and the MRI, showed the cancer, but the lymph nodes were clear, learned that pathology has the last say. And after that surgery, so I had a mastectomy and reconstruction immediately, they had found it in 5 of 5 lymph nodes resected. So that's when it moved, and this is my terminology, from one and done to full Monty. And the full Monty meant 21 weeks of chemo, and it was meant to be 20, but I also went through the floods, so they gave me an extra week. 21 weeks of chemo, then more surgery to remove from lymph nodes. Everything that they do that's designed to save your life also comes with a mighty punch and side effects. And then, radiation, and and here I am. And hair's regrowing back, and it's curly now.
No, that's really lovely. It's actually really lovely. It sounds really suit you now. It's getting a link on it too. But yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're going to talk about the things that you actually developed to help you kind of get through that time. As you said, they developed over time. They weren't just things you wrote down. But these things are also really helpful for any time in your life, right? When you're going through.
Oh, absolutely.
You talked in the beginning, leaders often can have some doubt, some self-doubt about, whether or not they can do this. They'll often have times when I am leading people where you start to, wonder, is it all worth it? And everything feels like it's overwhelming on top of you. So why don't you share a little bit with us about these 4 tenets, and then we can explore what that means from a business point of view.
So the 4 tenets that I developed, the first one was, and shall I talk about it like in the breast cancer sense, and then we'll talk about it, how it can translate to business. So with what I was going through, what came out was to feel no shame. I was absolutely determined that I wasn't going to feel shame about the changes that are happening to my body. It was beyond my control, and it's not to, I liken it to a war wound. And again, this is, giving full acknowledgement to those that have actually fought, but then they're fighting for their lives and fighting for a cause. I've also been fighting for my life. So I just refuse to feel no shame about things looking different there, that I've got scars. And, to feel no shame for asking for help, to feel no shame about any of it. I was in a very vulnerable situation. I'm used to being very independent, to leading. And this was really a time where, it was about being open to and receiving, support, which went into the second one, which was say yes to everything. And with the saying yes to everything, we're often taught in a leadership perspective, learn to say no. The flip of that is actually to receive help. And I knew somehow that I couldn't do this alone. And so I said yes to the medical, support, the adjacent support like from Breast Cancer Foundation, Dove House, Cancer Society, all of them amazing. I said yes to friends offering to do things for me, said yes to counseling without knowing if I need it, said yes to physiotherapy. I basically said yes. I knew it was going to be a team that would get me through this. And yeah, I'm really glad I did. Even if I didn't know what I was signing up for, I just thought I need all hands on deck, to help me through this. And then the third one was to find the joy in a lot of darkness. And, for me, that was exercise to a very reduced capacity. I signed up for, and it was a friend of mine in Sydney that told me about this. She's gone through a really, all cancer's challenging, a very even more brutal cancer. And unfortunately, she's fighting for her life again. And the CEPs are clinical exercise physiologists, and they're designed to work with people like if you've got a heart condition, diabetes, and also cancer, people going through cancer. And that just meant that it was a controlled environment. And what I loved, and this was even more joy, is I did it through the Auckland University system. So I'm helping Masters of Science students get their degrees. So that filled my heart with so much joy. And they're helping me, and I felt safe. And it was a, dramatically reduced capacity. And also going for walks. Again, friends were kind to go for a walk, and a walk that would normally take, maybe an hour, could take 3 hours. It was that because I needed to rest a lot. French bubbles. When I was well enough between, treatments and that, not all the time, but there'd be occasions that just helped me. And rightly or wrongly, I looked at it like I'm getting a lot of poison put in my body to heal me with the chemo. So I know that, champagne, all alcohol are poisons, but this brings me joy. And it was completely signed off, by my medical team, of course, always with moderation. And then the fourth one was celebrate the milestones, which relates into the find the joy. But I think also what's important here, and I'll talk about this in a business sense as well, a lot of those milestones weren't exactly cheery ones. So somehow I knew that I needed to crowdsource, support. So when I got my diagnosis, we were all hoping it was going to be a papillomatosis, which is a breast wart, charming. And then, I got the life-changing news. And, I rang around my friends and family that were coming. My sister was with me, and he said, "Do you still want us to come?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." So that wasn't exactly a celebration, woohoo. It was still a time of love and, connection, and it was a huge life event. And so that happened, throughout, even when I first went to the oncologist and second actually oncologist, when I learned about my stats, which aren't, exactly what I'd like after they found the lymph nodes. It's a 58% 10-year survival rate. And I remember, because I'd seen another oncologist and that was brutal as well. The second one, I thought, I've been told the 58, and people around me said, "Oh, but you're fit and healthy, so it's bound to be better. You're good for your age." So I asked her, I said, given I'm fit and healthy, could it be better than that? And she very dryly looked at me and correctly said, "I can't tell you what side of the 58% you're going to be on." That was the first time that death was put on the table for me, that, I could do everything right and I may die. So again, that required a milestone. That was huge news, that now each part is a step and not all of it was good news. But having that recognition of it was a significant event, really helped me. And also, like, all through each stage of treatment, and this clearly relates to business as well, like one step closer to the end goal, which is like being through active treatment and being alive.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start thinking about some of those things from a business perspective. So feel no shame. I mean, I must admit, I just actually had a skin cancer removed yesterday, and I remember when I signed the form from the doctor, and it said, it said something along the lines of, scarring is kind of natural and we can't guarantee that you won't have a scar and we can't guarantee it will go away. And I think if I'd been in my 20s, I would have gone, "Oh no, I don't want a scar." I'm 54 next week. And I was like, I knew that was going to come. And, I'm get a scar. That's absolutely fine. And I'm not worried about it anymore. But feel no shame in the business sense can mean that you can take some of these things and you can really make mountains out of molehills sometimes, can't you?
Well, wherever we're at with our own business, and again, whether we are self-employed or we do have a team of people that we're, ultimately responsible for, not everything goes to plan. We may have made some choices that don't serve us, or we've done everything that we look back on and think was right, but it still didn't play out. And it's just important not to feel bad about that, not to feel bad about yourself, to feel shame that you're not where you want to be. There's always that opportunity to get where you want to be. It just means that there's maybe more learning, different strategies. I really like, it's one of my favorite sayings is Virginia Satir. She was a clinical psychologist, and she did what she called a silly study. And that was, how many ways are there to wash dishes in order to get dry, clean dishes, I should say. And there was 250 different ways. So I use that as a great metaphor, that even if things aren't going as you want, there's always a solution. It's about, implementing, developing a strategy, implementing it. If it's not giving you the results you want, pivot, and then, trial again. And of course, there's going to be times where we don't feel so cheery, and there's, tools we can use for that to, to keep that flame burning. But I think an important starting point is shame does not serve us in any way at all. It's quite a destructive emotion. It's like there is no benefit to it. So just take it off the table and, look at other ways. What sort of support do you need to keep on moving forward?
I think you make a really good point. It's like, at the end of the day, we get taught in university and business studies that, businesses grow on this beautiful kind of S-shaped curve, and it's all beautiful, smooth sailing. But business isn't like that. No. We hit points where you can't do anything, and things go wrong, and you have to change, and you have to accept it, and you have to move forward. I had lunch with a friend today, and one of the things that they sort of said to me was, you can have somebody who's got 20 years of experience, But 20 years of experience can be seen in kind of two ways. It could either be somebody who's had actually only really 1 year of experience, but 20 times over, which means they've repeated the same thing over and over again. Or you've got somebody who's genuinely got 20 years of experience because every experience they've had, they've learned from, they've moved forward, and so therefore they're growing into the next experience. And I think that is part of business. It's like if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, not quite so great. But if you can take it and you can learn from it, don't feel any shame about the failure, but what can I take from it to move forward is the only way you'll get through it, right?
Absolutely. I think if anything, it's the capacity to learn is more important than berating ourselves if things don't, pan out the way that we had hoped.
Perfect. Okay. So next one, say yes to everything. And I love the way that you put this because, yes, we are always taught that we should say no to more things. But this isn't about, we still got to prioritize and make sure we are saying yes to the right things. But this is about actually asking for help, isn't it? And it's tough as a business owner or even as a leader in an organization, because asking for help sometimes feels like you're admitting that you're no good or that you're not good enough to actually do that. So if somebody if somebody wants to ask for help, but they feel like, oh, if I ask for help, it makes me look stupid, what would you suggest to them?
I would want to, first of all, understand more about what what's driving that they feel that's a negative thing. Again, I'm not a therapist, so it's not about going back into their childhood and that, but just to really understand, what the driver is, and then, work through that, and then, look at how is that, working for you to hold that belief, look at what could be some other ways, that they could look at things and, help them, or how can they go from there to there and to modify that belief. Because sometimes we really want to hold on to something. We have this sort of unintentional or unconscious righteousness. Well, I've got to do it by myself because if I don't, blah, blah, blah. So it's working through that belief and ideally, if the person is receptive to it, replacing it with a belief that they actually feel they can connect with, an alternative belief. But essentially, there's so many studies out there that prove that as human beings, we need to connect. And, we've gone into our own businesses for a particular reason. We're a particular makeup of people that do, but that doesn't mean that we're lone wolves. We still need that connection, and it's about working with other people in a way that's going to help us get the results that we want.
I see. I love it. Yeah. So it's exploring where our beliefs are coming from, trying to understand, not going back to childhood.
No, that's not my territory,
But being able to replace it with something that actually really ties you in kind of emotionally to the decision that you're now making. Therefore, you can actually change the way you approach it.
And one of the first things could be that there may be something there that it is considered a bad thing to ask for help. That they have, again, not going to therapy territory, but more rewarded, or they feel more validated if they've, struggled themselves. And yeah, so it's working through that.
And sometimes environments can make it difficult. I mean, we once did a talk at a very, very big law firm here in Auckland, and it was about the imposter syndrome. And we sent the invites out for this talk, and we weren't getting very many responses. And what we actually found out was that the calendars, because we were all on Microsoft Office, the calendars were shared amongst everybody. And people were actually scared of accepting the invitation, because if they accepted the invitation, it popped into their calendar and it was a workshop about imposter syndrome. And so they were concerned that people would then think that, well, you've obviously got an issue, you're going to an imposter syndrome workshop. So we actually had to change the title of it just to ensure that people didn't feel nervous about coming along to it. But environments can do that. They can make it difficult for you.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic example. And I've heard people say, oh, yes, but when I've asked for help or I've got help, it hasn't been very good. It's not, I'm better off to do it myself. So what I would say to that, is let's look at what broke down in that chain. Was it the brief? Do we need to work on the brief? And I've seen that with clients before where they don't provide a great brief. I've seen that back in my advertising days. And on the client side, it can be that side, or also, who they've picked. It might be the wrong company that they're working with, is not in alignment with values, or you don't know till you work with somebody. There's always a solution. If 10 people don't work out, look at that. Maybe if 10 people don't work out, it might be like, look at yourself, but also the 11th could.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. I think the brief is really important. I know actually in my own business sometimes, because I think so fast and because I talk so fast, I think I've said something really, really clearly, but the person hasn't necessarily heard what I thought I have said. So I always turn it back on myself and go, okay, so it's actually my responsibility to make sure they have heard what I thought I was trying to say. And I'll ask them to kind of repeat back to me what they've heard me say. And then it gives me a chance to go, oh, no, that's actually not what I meant. This is what I was actually thinking.
Absolutely. And I like the phrase communicate so you can be heard. And, I think I'm a great communicator. I've had that same sort of situation where it's like, oh, they're just not getting it, but I'm a good communicator. I'm really clear. It's like, no. What language are they speaking? And I'm not talking beyond English like that. It's just like, okay, so I'm not actually connecting with them. I'm not resonating. I need to listen to them more and then speak in terms, respectful terms in a way that they, can understand. And that's how, that whole communicate so you can be heard. And, we all go through that, not even though we may be speaking the same English, we're also not.
That's a good point. Okay. Find the joy. I mean, that's going to always be a challenge. In business, we all have bad days, right? Whether you're a leader, whether you're a business owner, you're going to have days sometimes where you just kind of go, what is going on? So how do we find the joy on those days?
Well, I think for me, what works, and this is about people finding what brings them joy. So it's asking, well, what do I like to do? I would suggest something healthy rather than something destructive for ourselves. So you may enjoy a couple of glasses of wine, but to have 2 bottles of that may not be so good. But, like for me, it's like walking really helps, connection with others, just, stepping away is really good. Time with my animals, that brings me absolute joy. So I look for ways when things are, like if I need to shift my state, like where I'm at, because we can start to go down a rabbit hole, even as a positive person, I can feel myself like, oh, and you start to drown almost. So it's like, well, okay, so I'm not feeling great. What can I do right now? Opening the fridge and, eating your feelings, it doesn't necessarily, that brings momentary joy, but something like a walk or, like what I've suggested, connection with others, they're really healthy ways, I think, just to find joy. I love mornings. So it's also, I suppose, I could get up in the morning and ignore that it's a beautiful day, or I can get up in the morning and see, my goodness, what a beautiful day. Let me go outside and smell that, for me, morning air. Or if night, it's like, oh, wow, gosh, that, really beautiful clear sky. So it's just really moving from that cloud that we have going on into sunshine for ourselves.
And I think we talked about this before we came into the podcast studio, but it is about understanding what is right for you, because we often kind of fall into the trap of we should do, or we ought to do, or this is what everybody else does. I mean, a classic example is one of my clients who he's my podcast editor. So hi Neil. He came to me and said, I've got this list of things that I want to do in the business. And one of the things when he had like a sports car and he wanted a flash watch. And I just said to him, do you wear a watch? Do you use a watch? And he's like, well, no, not really. And it's like, so why would you want a watch? He's like, well, that feels like it's success. It's like, well, it might be for some people, but really, if you don't like watches, there's no point at all. I actually love watches, and I have a really beautiful watch because I always wear a watch and I love using seeing the time. But for some people, that's not important. I love fast cars and sports cars. And so for me, having a fast car and a sports car is not about a status symbol, but it's about the joy of driving it. I love driving really fast cars. So what we were talking about with him was that actually, we often get forced down. My parents were very traditional. They wanted me to find a good husband, settle down, get married, have children. That was what they wanted for me. Turns out it wasn't what I wanted for myself. And so we've got to be very careful that the things that bring us joy is not the same. So what brings you joy may not bring me joy and vice versa.
Absolutely. And I think shoulds can be there. Yeah, it is. And, the shoulding all over yourself. Yes. So, yeah, it's really looking at, and this is where it's important with any of the tenets, anything in life, ask yourself quality questions. Now, those quality questions, the theory is open-ended, the most productive. Also closed-ended, so yes or no answers can also help, because that can help us get clarity. And then the open-ended helps us dig in further. And ask yourself questions to find out what it is that you really want. What is it that brings you joy, or what is it that you need support in if we're saying yes to everything? So asking yourself those questions, removing like, I should be a certain way, I need to listen to them because they know more. They may have more experience, and they're also wired their way, you're wired your way. So look at that person and see where, is it actually a match? There may be somebody else that has more experience that might be a better match for your wiring. Because it's not, I always say to clients, advocate stretching, because that's how you grow, but we don't want to stretch to the point that we break because we're trying to, make ourselves a different person. I also use another analogy, square peg, round hole. These are all common ones, but they're really important. So I often in my mind go through things like that. So it's like, well, okay, here, is this really a square peg, in a round hole? Doesn't mean I'm wrong. I might feel that. And then it's like, okay, but that's not really me, like going through that round hole, that's not right for me.
And like you said, doesn't mean that square is right or wrong, or circle is right or wrong, but it's just about being in the right position. I think this happens a lot in businesses. Like we talk about, obviously, values in the business and personal values as well. There has to be an alignment there. And just because you don't share the core values of the business that you're working with, that does not make you a bad person. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means you're not aligned with that organization. There'll be another organization out there that will absolutely, you'll just fit into that beautiful round hole because you're a round peg and everything's great.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
It's just funny because I think we tend to, we put all these labels on things around, what people should or shouldn't be, or what they, what we expect of them.
There's a place for all of us,
yes,
to be the way that we are.
Yeah.
I think, and this is why I really want to encourage people. And again, I work mainly with, business leaders. They're still human. They still have, they may have achieved a lot of success, and they still got, thoughts, feelings, insecurities, doubts. It's like knowing that we do, who we are as we are is really fabulous. Of course, we can always learn, we can always grow, we can modify behaviors. The starting point isn't a pile of crap. Starting point is really, like a diamond. It's just helping you shine more brightly, recognizing that your multifacets are fantastic as they are.
Diamonds and champagne.
I know.
You've got me. I'm all in.
You can see what brings me joy.
You can. Okay, so the last thing was about celebrating the milestones. And I think this is one of the things I have to say I'm not sure New Zealanders do particularly well in terms of not just, you talk about all the milestones, but in business, even the small wins. Like I've said a few times in the media just recently, is that I work between Australia and New Zealand, and I can have an Australian team. And let's just say we had like three measures. We've got revenue, profit, and a couple of measurables. So that's 4 things, and they've got 4 rocks they had to achieve in the quarter. If the Australian team gets kind of 3 out of the 4 of the measurables and 3 out of 4 of the rocks, and I ask them to grade that quarter in terms of how they think that quarter went, they'll go, oh, it's an A, maybe they'll go, it's A minus. I ask the same of a Kiwi team, and often with exactly the same numbers, exactly the same achievement rates, they'll be like, oh, it's probably a C, and it's like, wow, it's really amazing that we are so harsh on ourselves over here. And I think it's because we don't celebrate the small wins. So if we keep celebrating all the little milestones, we're in the right frame of mind to celebrate the bigger successes as well. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I've lived in both countries, and they're very different, the cultures of both, even though people, often lump the two together. Having lived in both, very, very different. And you've identified that. And, New Zealanders also like to celebrate, but potentially a different way. To Australians are very comfortable in acknowledging themselves as a rule, and New Zealanders tend to not be. They're a little bit more, low key. They like to be, I think that's part of the branding of a Kiwi. So again, not projecting on every New Zealander. So what is important about it is, yes, celebrating the milestones that are clearly wins, but also celebrating the milestones where you may not have won, because you've still put the work in. So let's say, thinking back in my advertising career, we might pitch for a new business. And, we've still put that effort in and we might have worked ridiculous hours to pitch to a prospective client. If we don't get it, that doesn't mean that we haven't put in that effort, that we haven't worked well as a team, that, we have still won in a way. We may not have that new business, but it's still, we've gone through that effort. That's why I made that distinction with, when I was celebrating the milestones through my treatment. Not all of them were, happy clappy events. So too in business. I think it's just when you work together. So let's say it's a team event, whatever the outcome, acknowledge and celebrate that. As an individual, it's really important to acknowledge, achievements. I mentioned to you, I'm moving at the moment and, certainly got myself into a little bit of a whirlwind mentally about all the things I've got to do. And I could feel myself starting to get too much into, I think it was turning into a twister there. So what I did was take a step back and actually acknowledge all that I'd achieved, that I'd actually hit all these milestones. Because what was happening was it's like, oh yes, I've done that, but I've got this to do. And it's like, yes, and I've done this, that, the other. And I think that's really important in a business context. There's always going to be more work to do. Acknowledge everything that you've achieved. And that can also help refuel us to keep going.
It's really interesting. Dan Sullivan, I think Hardy is his last name, I can't remember what his name is. They've actually written a book, and one of the key things is about always measure backwards. Because if you're always chasing the thing that's ahead, like you said, there's always something more ahead. But you've got to actually look and go, how am I now compared to a year ago? Wow, look how far I've come. And that's really important, is to do that measure backwards. Because if you're always just chasing the next thing, they gave a really great example of a guy who was like, once I get to 2 million, then I'll be happy. Then it was like 4 million, then I'll be happy. Then it's 6 million, then I'll be happy. He never got to happiness, right? Because you're always chasing the next thing and there's nothing, you're not acknowledging, wow, I came from nothing to 4 million. That's pretty impressive, So I think that you're right. It's not just about celebrating all the successes, but it's just about thinking about what you've actually achieved in that journey.
Oh, I wonder if it's like sometimes we don't, because we don't want to seem like the tall poppy. We don't want to seem like we're full of ego or full of bravado. We don't want to be flashy or whatever's going on for the individual. It's not about that. It's actually really, again, about that self-acknowledgement, about building that relationship with ourselves. None of us are perfect. We all have our off days, and there is an awful lot of good about us. So acknowledge that. Acknowledge when we are actually happy with our performance, and when we're not, what can we learn from that? What do we want to do differently? And then move forward again. Feel no shame, move forward.
Okay, we've got lots and lots of tips there, which is really great. From a coaching point of view, so if anybody's sitting here listening to this podcast, when do you feel it's kind of appropriate, or what are the telltale signs that you might need some help from an executive leadership coach?
I would say that if you're not where you want to be, whether it's sorting out a situation with your team, whether it's sorting out, something with your higher ups, whether it's, within your own career, I think it's really like you're here and you're looking at that and you want it to be different, but you don't know how. So, I employ coaches as well. I actually had a mindset coach moving through, my treatment. I suppose in some ways we often coach each other and things like that. It's like when you can't figure it out yourself, again, no shame about that. It's like that other person. And the thing with coaching is it's about helping you find your own answers. And certainly a coach can draw on experience, but it always has to be what's right for the, for the client. So I think that if things, the people I work with are used to success. They know success. So success is not new to them. It's when they feel that they're not achieving that what they know as success in any particular area, they could then benefit from somebody to, work with them to help uncover what's really going on, develop strategies, and then hold them accountable.
And I think you made a really good point there that mentors and coaches often get confused. And it's not so that a coach can't also be a mentor, but a real coach, and we're both qualified coaches, obviously, it is about helping the client to come to their own answers. We're not there to tell them what to do. We're not there to share experiences per se. We sometimes do if we're asked to, but it's really about helping them to come to the answers which actually lie within them.
Yes, and I think over the years, and I've done, a lot of different forms of training with coaching and leadership and things like that. I am such a huge advocate for the person being who they are. And that's why I love the phrase authentic leadership. And authenticity really came out in my treatment because, I couldn't be anything else but authentic really with what I was going through. And then, realize it's a bit of a buzzword also in the business world as well. There is space for all of us to be who we are. When we're authentic, we're actually operating at our best. That's a great platform, foundation to work from. So it's about how to be an authentic leader. So how to lead as who you are and still achieve those results. So it's not, again, all about hand holding and going, you're just the best person, I love you so much. It's about, well, okay, this is who you are. This is how you're wired. And you still need to be accountable and get those results. So how do we do that? So I just want, been around for a while. I just really, my wish for people would be to stop feeling that they have to be different to who they are. They have to be a different type of person. They don't need to be any more or less. They can be who they are. And then it's about learning, how to be both of those things. And that's something else I learned in treatment and so many great metaphors for, real life, for professional life, is that two opposite things can coexist at the same time and still be, true. So I was told I had a treatable breast cancer, but I was also told it was aggressive. It's like, well, which one is it? Chicken or fish or whatever. And it was actually both. And I think, you can be authentic and you can also, get the results. You don't have to be a particular type of person to get the business results.
Be authentic and learn tools and
yes,
techniques
exactly,
to achieve those results. Fantastic. Hey, look, it's obvious you're very passionate about what you do. Tell me what your ideal client kind of looks like.
My ideal client would be somebody that takes responsibility for themselves, that wants to learn and grow, that does know what success is like, that they have, that their ego, we all have ego, that their ego doesn't necessarily drive them, that they really have that openness for, when I say betterment, I'm not contradicting what I've just said about authenticity, but they really want to, learn and grow and achieve the results. Like I love results and, I like moving forward. So people that want to do that, again, I'm very clear because over the years that I've been coaching, it's important to have that clarity. I'm not a therapist. So it's, whilst there may be a healing aspect to coaching, if they have some more healing, I would be recommending, and they can do both, see a therapist and see a coach.
Hey, Caro, look, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom with us. Amazing journey that you've been on and well done for, coming out the other side in a positive way. So that's really great. Really pleased to see it and give you time.
Thank you, Debra.
And we'll put Caro's details in the podcast notes. If you want to get in contact with Caro, you can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.